I think that's okay.
All right. Well, the title is the Camellia Crown Jewels. So you're really getting a look at Descanso Gardens, the Huntington Botanical Gardens, and Nuccio's Nursery. So I call them the Triple Crown of Southern California. If you ever do come to Southern California, you need to visit all three of these places because they're really the heartland of camellias. And I know some of you have already have visited, and I'll give you a little tour of these gardens. This is the Descanso Gardens, and this is one of the shots I like because it's at the back of the tea house and picks up the camellias on the right-hand side and the nice Japanese bridge. Do you see my arrow when I go, Richard?
Yes.
Okay. Well, in about a month or less, couple, 3 weeks, the cherry blossoms come out. And as you know, cherry blossoms are really big. I'm moving it because my wife's talking on the phone and it's giving me background music and noise. Sorry. With a dog and a wife, things go the way they go. Manchester Bodie bought Rancho Los Amigos and set up a camellia plantation. And he also built this house, the Bodie house, and he and his family lived in it for many years. Over here where the bay window is a Camellia Room, which is always fun to visit. Right now it's really used for exhibits, art exhibits and things like that. As I said, Bodie really set up the whole plantation, which became Descanso Gardens as a cut flower industry. So you see a lot of mature, good-sized camellias. This, of course, is Pink Perfection, and it's still one of the most beautiful little flowers. I'm sure all of you are familiar with it, and it's just a wonderful little bloom that's sort of mid-season to late season. I just took this year. This is a whole grove of camellias. One of the curators had hacked them all down to little stubs, and now they look really very good, mature blooms. The good thing about public gardens like Descanso, but also the ones throughout the country and other places, is that they sometimes store some of the older camellias that we don't grow as show flowers. And Descanso in particular has a lot of star nurseries. Mr. Yudamoso's imports. He was really the big importer of camellias in the early 1900s. And he's a Japanese American who imported many camellias. The two I have here are Hanafuku, which I believe is called the Wealth and Noble Flower, and Okinomami, which I can't write a good translation of that, but it's something to do with waves because of the petals are wavy. But it's nice to see these early imports labeled and where you can look at them in Descanso. I'm sure you're all familiar with Tinsy. Bokahan is a personal name, so it's just the last name of a Japanese person who was named the flower. I don't know if you're familiar with Tinsy, but I've watched bees they just go right the heck through those petaloids and will fertilize Tinsy. So it sets seeds very readily, even though it looks like you couldn't get through there. The bees just nestle themselves right in there. The iconic Descanso flower is Bernice Bodie, which he introduced in 1946. But what Bodie did is when Mr. Yudamoso was interred in about 1942, he bought all of his camellias. There were thousands of them. I believe he paid about $50,000. It was probably $300,000 or $400,000 worth of plants. But anyway, he took the seeds and plants from the Star nurseries and propagated them. And this is sort of their iconic flower, Bernice Bodie. And as you probably know, the first reticulatus to come to the Western world, especially America, came in 1948 to Descanso. And this is short silk, and that's Wayne Walker, who was the curator of camellias for many years. He's since retired. And here's some of the beautiful reticulatas. You know, this must have been pretty awesome. We're used to big retics now, but we just didn't in 1940s and early 50s. Purple gown is just a gorgeous, large, very large flower. So it's really nice that they're part of our heritage. And even a cornelian I like because it has gorgeous variegation. And that's been around for hundreds of years. So we don't know where all these viruses came, whether it be the COVIDs, probably somewhere in China. And this originates in China too, but where the first ones came and how they came is unknown. But this is a good example of a very nice variegated camellia. And Lionhead is another gorgeous red large retic. Then in 1950, they begin to import some more Camellias reticulatus, and this is Confucius. I'm not going to list all of them, but sort of examples of what came over. It's nice to see some of the lighter colored pink flowers at that time. When Mrs. D.W. Davis mutated or sported at Descanso, they caught the sport and developed it. And this is Mrs. D.W. Davis Descanso. It's a blush color, very, very pretty anemone style flower. Gibson Girl, they also introduced in 1947. I suspect these also were some of the seeds and seedlings that they got from Star Nursery. And Descanso Surprise also is a pretty white flower that they introduced in the 1949. These are not ones we're going to see at shows, and most of you are not going to be growing them. So it's nice to see them in places like Descanso. They're sort of our library of camellias. This is why I put Warrior, which Nuccio's introduced in 1960. This is the only plant I could find. The Nuccios don't have it, they don't propagate it, but it's there in Descanso. And it's just a nice big red camellia. So again, it's nice to see the varieties or cultivars being grown somewhere. This is a little series of flowers in about the 1950s to 1985. There were as many as 35 Camellia azalea nurseries in the Southern California area, meaning Pasadena and the sort of Los Angeles County. Excuse me, I guess I clicked myself. And Kramer Brothers introduced Coral Delight, which is really a nice coral pink flower. I know I grow it, a lot of other people do. It's kind of semi-dwarf, so it's a nice one to put under a window if you want to keep it down low and still have something beautiful. Also, Kramer's introduced Spring Days. This we see everywhere. I'm sure some of you grow that. On the left is how I usually see it. And then it's sort of a couple others, but it can also be formal double. I know I've seen Gary Shands was on this, and maybe Don Lesmeister, you can get a very formal flower. I get it when I jib it, but it's a really pretty small flower. And I like the name, Spell check doesn't pick that up. Vern McCaskill introduced 70 or 80 different camellias out of his Pasadena nursery. And this is one that is really nice because it's pink with just a little white edge and a little texture like cloisonne. Vern McCaskill. This is sort of the Descanso's probably the prettiest area is the Japanese garden. It's beautifully laid out by the local Japanese society. And it's sort of typical to have some water, a fountain, and that's just a nice little white unknown sasanqua. This is the tea house from the other side, and that's Wheel of Anemone is the translation of that sasanqua. It's one of the few anemones, sasanquas. And then sasanquas, Jean May and Hugh Evans. These really peak November and December here, so they're pretty well no longer blooming at this time. But you can see it's a beautiful layout. I took this about 2-3 weeks ago to really just show you the massive blooms and the big camellias that grow under the oak trees. And this is the way Descanso looks, and it's just the beautiful live oaks. You have live oaks in the south. We have the California live oaks. You have the southern live oaks, but they're a beautiful free form, and I like the way it shades the camellias and other plants. It's just a very lovely area. This year, we don't have shows in Southern California, but we're helping Descanso with their Camellia Festival, which is the month of February. We lent them plants for the display, and we're doing, some of our members are doing these flower arrangements for the public to look at. One of the beauties of the gardens too is other flowers. Tulips do not naturally grow in California. In fact, when we get them, we usually have to put them in the refrigerator for 2 or 3 weeks, and they'll bloom. I saw the plantings this week, but they're not out yet. And it can be a very lovely display in the Descanso area. And this sort of ends the Descanso section. And Descanso means a peaceful place. And, you know, it's peaceful to be able to sit on a bench and have camellias around you. So the Huntington North Vista is one of the big areas for camellias. It faces north, and in the clear day, you can see in the San Gabriel Mountains. So if you have a 10-foot statue and don't know what to do with it, this is how you do it. I mean, there's a couple dozen of them here. The camellia you see behind this statue is fascianata, which is really a beautiful big camellia, a sport of faith, lovely bloom. This is Henry E. Huntington. He earned his money on the railroads and petroleum exploration. And that's the little flower. It's not so little, medium-sized, the large flower that the Nuccios named for him, the Henry E. Huntington flower. William Hertrick was the first curator of the Huntington Gardens, and Howard Asper was at Descanso when they brought the camellias from Japan, but then he moved over to be the camellia curator at the Huntington. The Huntington has a lot of money, and they certainly recruit the best people to do things. Asper was a very good camellia hybridizer, and he named this for his boss, William Hertrick. And it's an early reticulate, early meaning not that it blooms early, but it was introduced early. And then they introduced this nice formal white japonica, named it for his wife, Marguerite Hertrick. You know, there's a lot of beautiful formal double camellias that aren't seen very much. This is one. You probably see Seafoam in the south, and we see Nuccio's gem. But there's a lot of other really beautiful white medium japonicas that are not as popular. This is a good example. It's a medium, but it's closer to 3 than 4 inches in my experience, looking at it at the Huntington. Carl Target was an attorney in Chicago, and like a lot of Easterners, when they retire, they want nice weather, so he moved to California and got very active in camellias, and at the Huntington, edited a now classic book that's out of print on camellias. So it's a reticulata they named for Carl Target. Snowbell was imported by the Huntington from Japan, and they renamed it. Who knows what its Japanese name was, but it's the only place I ever see it is at the Huntington, but it probably has it. I know it has its origin somewhere in Japan. Rudy Moore took over for Hertrick and was the Camellia curator at the Huntington for about 20 years. And he bred this little flower with the wonderful little petaloids in the center and named it for his son, Little Michael. I understand Little Michael's now over 6 feet, so, but isn't that a beautiful little flower? It's one of those flowers, if it didn't have the petaloids, it's not very interesting. Sometimes petaloids are annoying, but in this case, I think it makes a really pretty little flower. When you're in the gardens year after year, you can find mutations, and Rudy Moore found this mutation, this spot on Magnolia flora. I like it when it's on the left, just plain, rich, deep pink, but I saw them in the Huntington with the rich, deep, and then very rarely you see it with white petals and pink flowers. More often you see it with just one or two little white genetic markings on the flowers. But if you're creative, you get the 3 flowers with each having a white mark and get them all on a tray of 3 and set them up just the right way. It can make a very uniform bloom, even though it has that irregularity. But it's another mutation that's an interesting flower that came out of the Huntington. Like the sconsa, the Huntington tries to take care of flowers that have been in other parts of the world for a long time that we don't grow anymore. And this is a good example. Yokohama Nursery is pretty famous, and I introduced a lot of blooms in Japan and shipped a lot to the United States. And this is one Iowani. I think this is actually Iowani shibori, meaning variegated Iowani. And here's another example. Odoristoma has a faint fragrance, and it came from the Guilfoyle Nursery in Australia, which is a very famous nursery. No longer there, but it's again nice to have these old cultivars where we can appreciate them. In early 1900, a little seedling was picked up by Mr. Cates off of a steamer out of Japan. And he took it to our nursery in San Dimas, California, and it grew there for many years. And when they sold the nursery, Ralph Peer was the second person to get the reticulatas. He's a wealthy man in the music industry, Southern Music Company. So when they were going to take down this lovely camellia, he had it shipped to his estate in North Hollywood. And then when he sold his estate, he arranged for it to be moved to the Huntington. It's the oldest flower that we know of the oldest cultivar in California. And it's just a nice big red camellia, but it's nice again to have the history of some of the older camellias. I don't know about you, but I really love the higos, and they're not really generally a show flower. And this is both the sconso, but especially the Huntington, have wonderful collections, and they're in bloom right about now. And this is Jitsugetsu Sai, the moon, the sun, moon, and stars. And again, the hallmark of a higo is what? The beautiful stamens in the middle. Neofabuki has a slight fragrance. So the Japanese I think they just have the nicest name, Scented Snowstorm, for Neofabuki. It's a nice name. And again, they're not deferred by or discouraged by the fact that it's got 2 little red marks here. It's somewhat irregular. They're just a different kind of camellia, always a single. Girardi says this is extinct, but there's a nice cultivar growing in the Huntington, and they're propagated. And this one's called Dawning Sky in English, or a nice, again, this is good shaped. A higo tends to be kind of triangular like that with 3 big petals. This is why they don't win, they're not going to win in a medium japonica class in the singles, or because they're single and irregular, but they're an interesting addition to the hobby. On this one, Manuka no Haru, Spring of the Capital City, is another example of a Hiko camellia. And Star Nursery, as I said, has been out of business since 1946 when he was interred. But at the Huntington, we have one of his introductions, Miss Pasadena. And Kramer Brothers did many very famous camellias. Miss Universe is this just a nice little white camellia. Tuttle Brothers Nursery isn't well known, but in 1949 they introduced Mrs. Tingley, and that's stayed pretty popular. Many people grow it throughout the country. My wife always liked this. I cut down one, and she was so annoyed with me I had to go buy a couple more. But it's a pretty little medium formal double out of Tuttle Brothers Nursery. Harvey Short was a very prolific hybridizer in the San Diego area. And this is one that he introduced, Extravaganza. And you'll see a lot of white flowers with red marks, and this is his. Again, Vern McCaskill, we talked a little bit about at Descanso. Vern named this particular flower for his wife, Billy McCaskill. So it's another place where we see Vern McCaskill's work, or his camellias. I think Jack McCaskill was his son. Again, a nice pink flower. Nice red, Lady in Red, he introduced in 1959. Big, bright flower. And of course, most of us do have some of the camellia species. This one I propped up to get a nice view of the Huntington Garden. It's seen there, there's some, and it shows the fruit tree and some of the water features. This species see, Grantamiana, there's the flower, that's the bud. The bud really looks like it's spent. And fortunately, in this case, I was able to get here's the seed pod, the bud, and the flower that I captured because it was in the Huntington. Next month, the wisteria will bloom in the Japanese garden. It's a beautiful Japanese garden. The Chinese garden is also fairly new, and they keep building, and building. There's a whole new addition. The Huntington knows how to raise money. When you want to get the Japanese garden, you go to the Japanese Americans of Japan and get wealthy people to donate. Now we go to China, and especially Chinese Americans. There's many Chinese Americans in the West Coast, both in Washington and California, and they really support. And the Chinese garden in Huntington is really spectacular, and it improves as the plants mature. This one I took this year, just a little show of the Japanese, the Chinese New Year going on with the lanterns. Nuccio's nurseries began when this is our boys. This is the founding fathers are from right to left. This is Bill Woodward. He's famous because he started the camellia nomenclature. And as I understand the history, Southern California got to do the camellia nomenclature, and the American Camellia Society got to register new camellias. They worked out sort of a gentleman's agreement, and it continues that way today. This is Joe Nuccio. This is Julius Nuccio, the brothers that founded the Nuccio Nursery in 1939. This is the president of Southern California Society back then, whose name I cannot remember now. And this is a seedling that won the Ilg Seedling Jabonica Award in they're getting the award for. This is Grand Slam. And we have a member, Merle Gray, who passed away recently, and she said the way it got its name is it's sitting in your yard and it slams on the ground. That's the Grand Slam, falling off the calyx. Julius Nuccio, or Jude, is the son of Jim Nuccio, excuse me, yeah, of Joe Nuccio. I'm sorry, Joe Nuccio. And so they called him Jude. He was named after his brother's brother. If you get it, he's maybe it'll help here. His Julius's two sons. I particularly like this one of Tom Nuccio. They're now running the nursery because Jude died in last year. I like this for two reasons. That's a Night Rider that he's holding, and you can see the red roots. Also, his hands are clean, but he has worked all of his life in the garden. He has the biggest, strongest, most calloused hands you ever met. And he's exceedingly personable and generous with his information, his knowledge. And by the way, he went to college, graduated college, and rowed, was on the rowing team when he was in college. So, and he joined the nursery after Jude did. And this is Jim Nuccio, and Jim just turned 71. We're hoping that the Nuccios will stay alive and for all of us for 5 or 10 years. But Jim's the youngest, no one else is coming along, and he's 71 years last week. So we want to keep honoring them and remembering them. Very friendly group of people. Their first introduction, meaning Joe and Julius, was Catherine Nuccio, which they named after their mother. Later, they found a bigger, actually nicer flower, Katie, also named after her. I understand she was a plus-size woman and liked big flowers, and Katie is what they came up with, and it's a very nice, large camellia. Of course, you need to name one after your father, but you name it for your mother first, almost always. Julius Giulio Nuccio was the brother's father. When I first joined the Camellia world, Sunset Magazine had the best literature, and they said this was the best red camellia available. Well, there's a lot of nice red camellias now, but it is a classic, and it's really nice when it has lots of action in the center there with the petals. And the variegated form is also very impressive. The Nuccios have used the Giulio Nuccio variegated often in their variegation. And I think Don Lesmeister has used it also in some of his work, which you're going to see in the Camellia Review and other things, some interesting work with variegation. We thank you, Don. This is Joe Nuccio, and that's the flower named after him. It's a non-retic hybrid, medium, early, and the long season. It's interesting because it's a funnel double with those incurved petals. A nice bloomer. And this is Julius Nuccio. Again, this is about the 1969 photo of him, and this is the camellia that they named after him after he retired. And Julius Nuccio is a big award-winning flower. Got the Ilg Seedling Japonica Award, but it's also a big show winner. It's a very, very nice flower, big and nice color. They were going to name Nuccio's Bella Rosa for Julius, and he refused because he was not retired then, and he just wouldn't let them do it. So they named this formal double red camellia Nuccio's Bella Rosa, and then there's the variegated. The variegation here also it's one of the nicer variegated flowers. I actually like the variegated flower better than the flower. However, it is a nurseryman's delight because in a 1-gallon plant, you'll see flowers like this. And in the Nuccios, I've seen 5-inch, almost 5.5, 6-inch unjibbed flowers on a 1-gallon plant. I mean, that, you know, this is what nurserymen want, right, Mark? You want a flower that looks good and blooms readily and shows flowers when it's young. That's the way people want to buy things. They don't want to wait years for something to bloom. Nuccio's Cameo is just a beautiful medium to large formal double. To get the Nuccio name on it, they really expect the flower to be a strong contender, a really good cultivar. The other thing I like about Nuccio's Cameo, it blooms early, mid-season, and late season. So it's not a prolific bloomer at one time, but you get a long season. And it's a beautiful flower. I think Nuccio's Carousel is pretty popular here in California, but I don't think too many people in the South grow it. But it's a very nice flower because of the two-tone colors of pink, sort of the light colors that then get darker, and it gets some nice flowers. It blooms pretty readily too. It's a nice bloom. Nuccio's Gem is pretty wide. As I said, it's one of the white formal double camellias you see in California and all over the East Coast. And it won the Ilg Seedling Japonic Award in 1979. Also their jewel, Nuccio's Jewel, won the Ilg Seedling Japonic Award. It's a really very pretty mid-size loose peony bloom. It blooms in the end of the season or mid to late season. So for example, I don't have any blooming right now. So it's one of the flowers I like to jib because I think it's very, very lovely, and it sort of needs some help to get to the shows if you're going to have a show in January or early February. Nuccio's Pearl is also mid to late season bloomer, and there are many beautiful white, off-white with pink edges, and this is one their contributor. It's blooming quite readily in my garden. And has nice flowers, blooms well, reliable bloomer. I don't see Nuccio's pink lace very much anymore, but when it does its thing, it's a good-sized loose peony flower, sort of a blush light pink, but a good addition to the garden. One of their better reticulatas is Nuccio's Ruby. Again, nice blooming reticulata, good color. I don't know how many of you know about the Ilgs Award, but it's really the American Camellia Society's top, I guess it's the top seedlings get this award, and Nuccio's won at least 10 awards, and they're still winning them. You may recognize a few of these. This is Black Magic at the top. Black Magic is a love-hate, I have a love-hate relationship with. I love it when it blooms like this, but I hate it when the buds drop off, which is very frequent, or when it just sort of sits there and doesn't open up. But when it does, it is a spectacular bloom. And it's pretty distinctive because that's thick, waxy petals, and almost always has that circular stamens. Down below is a happy harlequin, which is a nice semi-double flower with a white border, pink with stripes. You probably recognize Royal Velvet. Many of you know this story, but I'll tell it anyway. Jim Nuccio was, I'm going to give you the more dramatic version. He was sitting on the throne, taking care of business, and saw a red mat underneath his feet, turned it over and saw the name Royal Velvet. And that's how they decided to name this flower Royal Velvet. The cleaner version, and Tom says is the true version, is he was taking a shower. Two more winners, Fire Dance Variegated. The Nuccios for years did not want to introduce Fire Dance. They said it's just another red bloom. And it's done very, very well. And its variegated one, I think, is even more beautiful, spectacular when it has that moiré kind of look to it. And then Cherries Jubilee. My Cherries Jubilee is just beginning to open, and that dark red flower with some, I like to see a little more white frosting in there. You know, it's named for the beautiful dessert called Cherries Jubilee, vanilla ice cream and flambéed. And it's just a delicious dessert with cherries on it. One of the more popular sasanquas is Yuletide. Just a simple red flower with a gold stamens, very popular, nice grower, stays sort of trim and neat, and it won the Ralph Pierce Sasanqua Award. I think one of the best mutants of all of the elegans is Elegant Champagne. Mine is doing very well right now, and Gibbed or Natural is a big, very big, very beautiful flower. And there's a yellow cast in the center, and that's really the stamens. Not that it's a yellow bloom at all. I took one today, and the light shining through, and it looks like there's gold bubbles all in there like champagne. But it is a beautiful, beautiful flower that was caught by the Nuccios and is propagated. Two other winners in the Harris Hybrid Award, meaning they're non-retics and top growing buttons and bows. Very pretty, formal double flower, blooms very readily, very freely. And I think my favorite of all the non-retics, regardless of type, is Island Sunset. I have a hard time picking my favorite Japonica or Reticulata, but Island Sunset's my favorite. I just love the two-toned of the colors, the vibrance, and it also blooms very readily. It's a very nice bloom. I do enjoy Tama Peacock. It's probably the best of the Tama Aurora seedlings that the Nuccios have introduced, and it won the Catherine and Les Marbury Award for miniature small camellias in 2015. The other thing that's good, if you're into hybridizing, it sets seeds readily. Tama Aurora does, Tama Peacock does, Tama Americana not so well, but it will produce white-bordered camellias for you. This is their most recent award, and it's Ferris Wheel, and it's a beautiful white flower with red stripes. It mutated, and this is and they call it Circus, and this is what they introduced this year. As far as I know, this is the only 2020. The camellia season starts on September 1st, according to the Nuccios. I don't know. But anyway, Circus is a mutation, a very lovely strawberry mutation that Nuccios are propagating and selling. I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up getting an award in the future as we see it. Both Tom and I like this better than Ferris Wheel. But again, you know, that's why we have a lot of flowers. Maybe you like more the white background, maybe you like more the strawberry. Nuccio's is also very famous for its azaleas, even though most of us, you know, have a few. This is sort of a shot of their back area of the camellias. Well, it's as you come into the parking lot, it's about where I'm standing, and this is a beautiful shot of a series of their azaleas. And a couple, I'm not gonna, you know, they've also Nuccio's introduced over 200 camellia cultivars, including those that are mutations and variegated by them, and about at least 100 different azaleas. Azaleas are not as well documented, partly because thousands of seeds come from one pod. Anyway, this top one is Nuccio's Ragtime, Nuccio's Carnival below, which has big flowers and does very well in hot climate. It sort of it was built for California. I don't know how it does in the South, but you have the Southern Indicas, which are also gorgeous. And when I lived in New England, they got different kind of azaleas that could survive the winter. And then the newest is this sort of dragon-styled Camellia, and they call this Nuccio's Wicked Witch. And there's I think there's half a dozen different types. Nuccio's not only introduced camellias and azaleas, but they imported them. The most famous import of their camellias was Tamanoara, but just as important in the azalea world is that they imported the Satsuki azaleas, which they've propagated the original ones, and then they've also grown their own. And they're May blooming. I think Satsuki means 5th month or May. So they have a long history in Japan and do very well in California. I assume they do well in the South, and they do add to the season, and they're a lovely addition. This is my resident hummingbird who sits in the wildfire, which is a Nuccio's introduction. I look out the window and I see birds and camellias. Camellias and birds do very well. They like the undergrowth of the camellias. So it's about time for me to say goodbye as the sun is setting, and I really say good night to you. And thank you very much for your, and I'll try to answer any questions, at least for a few minutes.